Now I am going back to the PowerPoint. So again, we found that African American, African American, the African American population represents 6%. So again, 2% versus 6% for me sounds like something is going on. Okay. Now I'm going back to the other example. I identify African American students, but I also identify 40 and older students. So let's do the same analysis. I'm going to go to the student equity report and I'm going to look at the numbers. So when I look at the numbers, I see that people 50 and older represents 32%. Okay. And when I go to civilian, only for Cesar Chavez, I see that 50 and older populations, they represent 37%. So if I go back to my table, I only have 22% I mean, my course or my class only had 22% of 40 and older students. So for me, again, that is a problem. So what I did here is that I used all this data to confirm that there's something going on. Because by comparing my data versus the program's data and versus the city data, yes, I'm not getting as much students as I would like to get. But this is the thing. How can we move the needle here? Many of you in your online forms put that question like, hey, I'm wondering, I have identified that I don't have, my Latino students, they represent a smaller proportion that I would like them to represent. How can I improve that? So I wanted to ask you, how can we move the needle there? Like if I am interested in enrolling more African American students or more older students, how would I do that? Any thoughts on that?
Older students, did you say?
Yeah, I would say older students and also African American students.
Well, the first question is that the same?
That would be another important thing. You would need to keep looking into the data just to ensure that the same African American students are.
What age?
Yeah, what age they are, because you're talking a difference between one person and four people, and you're looking at a 20% drop almost, and you're over 40. Well, if your demographics of your African Americans is largely over 40, maybe they're retired military, who knows? That's going to kick that. The other, then it may be a time issue or something like that that's caused it. I mean, again, a lot there you're scratching the surface, but you kind of need some other thing to see, because your number, especially with African Americans, between your desired of 4 and your actual 1 is such a low number that could just be because it's Mouseketeer Day at Disneyland. I mean, it's a small enough number, it's not statistically valid.
Correct. And that is the place where it's very important to, this is where things get into a combination of the data that you're getting, but also your own knowledge. Because just by using your own knowledge, you would know if that is something that is happening consistently, or maybe it's just like a one-time thing. Because if this is just a one-time thing, you might say, well, yeah, it happened that time, but I mean, I continued offering that class, and in the future, after that didn't happen anymore, so I'm going to stop worrying about that. It seems like we fixed it. So those are the kind of things why it is always very good to do a combination of looking at the data and also using your own knowledge. And that is also why we encourage you to use many data sources. Just like in this case, we went from the data sheet to other 2 reports. And the more reports you want to throw in there, that's okay. As long as you feel confident, as long as you kind of like have a lead on what is the direction that you're taking. The one thing that I wanted to point out, because you mentioned this in your online form, and I was struggling a little with this one, was the fact that headcount, like increasing the headcount or increasing enrollment for a specific demographic, and I wanted to throw this question to you as a group, like can any of that, if I am interested in increasing the enrollment of a particular demographic, is that something that I can do within the classroom?
Within the classroom? No.
No, unless the students love it so much they tell their friends.
right? Or I mean, I mean, you mean in terms of marketing
Intentionally.
for students, or what? I'm not sure I understand completely your question.
The question is, as I was looking at the data and I was putting together this exercise, and as I was looking at your online forms, I was thinking, okay, say that I identify that I would like to have more African American students in my classroom, but how can I do that using a classroom intervention?
Well, first, would there not be, at what liberty are we to actually check other courses, if they're offered, in that same area, to see if how you compare directly broken down course to course, not all of the courses lumped together? Is there any way you can find that out first to see if maybe it is something within your classroom itself that you need to think about differently? Maybe if it's the same for all of them in that particular area, then maybe it's something that you need to find out that population needs to know that you even exist, and maybe it isn't something that's actually in the classroom.
So what I'm taking from what you said is that saying that, yeah, it seems like this particular population is not aware of this program. Going back to my example, say maybe what's going on is that my class was offered in Cesar Chavez, whereas the classes from the other faculty members were offered at different campuses. So right now what's going on is that they are not aware of my program in, around Cesar Chavez. But that takes me to a place where I'm like, all right, so I want to fix that. And as Bob Pyle said, maybe I could do like a tremendous job with the African American students in a way that they will love my class so much that more will come. They will, word of mouth, and I'll have more. But it feels like I mean, how much can that really impact the amount of students that I could get the next term? So what I was getting from that is that for me, that would be, in order to do something regarding that, I would need to connect either with my program chair, with my dean, with my VP, or maybe with the outreach team. We would have to connect with people, and that would start being, that would stop being something that we do inside of the classroom to become something like an outside of the classroom intervention. And the reason why I wanted to take you to this place was A, because I wanted to talk about headcount because many of you had that in there, but also B, I wanted us to start speaking about things that can be done inside of the classroom, just because the objective of the Faculty Institute or the action plan needs to be related to classroom interventions. So what I would have to do in this case, in my example, is to acknowledge that there's a problem, yes, and there are ways to fix it, yes. Unfortunately, those actions, besides the one that Bob Pyle mentioned, those actions would be outside of the classroom. Therefore, I would not necessarily include them in my action plan.
But also, it could just be an anomaly, right? Like it could be just that semester, and if you reviewed, 3 other semesters, you'd find that you were actually over, enrolled with African American students, and it's just a blip.
Yes, and that is what, as Brian mentioned, could be that the data is not really significant. Like statistically speaking, this data doesn't tell me anything. And that is why we really encourage you to look at many data sheets, your spreadsheet, like compare data throughout time, and also use your own knowledge to really know if there's something there or not really. So it's kind of like you get that combination of looking at the data, but also knowing your past history and determining, yeah, is that really going on or not really?